Hola, hola, ¿cómo está mi clase favorita? How's my favorite class doing? Welcome to another episode of More Than Tequila, the podcast where we seek to understand Latinos, Latino culture from a very Canadian perspective. My name is Juan Carlos Rocha Osornio. I'm Associate Professor of Spanish Teaching Stream in the new Department of Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and Latin American Studies at the University of Toronto in Canada. Today, we are joined by a very special guest. His name is Diego Rupolo. Diego, tell us, are you Latino? Do you consider yourself Latino? Or what is your connection to the Latino world?
So this is the one question you let me know about before, and so I've had some time to think about it. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I don't have an easy answer to the question. I'm Canadian, born in Canada. My parents are Italian, but my mother was born in Argentina, and that's kind of how I always phrased it when I was younger. I would say, "Oh yeah, my parents are Italian, but my mom was born in Argentina." Recently, I had the chance to go back there for an exchange, and I was there for a year and met kind of a lot of my family and realized that no, my family is actually Argentinos. they're not really like they're Italian, but like the way that Diaspora is there is so different than here. So now I'm kind of in a little bit of a I don't want to call it an identity crisis, but it's a little bit where I'm like, I don't know if I'm checking that box on the forms. I don't know if I feel like I do have more of kind of a claim to that, Latino identity than I thought I did even a couple years ago.
Okay, interesting. All right. Do you speak Spanish?
So I feel like I'm intermediate advanced Spanish speaker. It's improving every day, but it's not something that comes naturally to me. It's something I heard as a kid when I would visit my nonna, my mom and her mother spoke Spanish as their kind of main language, but it was not something that was ever taught to me. I didn't learn it until high school.
High school, okay. Where are you from, Diego, in Canada? Canada, big country. Where are you from?
So I'm from here. I was born and raised in Brampton, and I've been living in Toronto for just over 10 years now.
Okay, all right. And what do you do professionally?
So right now I'm a full-time student. So I'm a full-time student at the University of Toronto. That's where I study Latin American studies, human geography, and then I have a minor in diaspora and transnational studies. Okay. I'm a mature student. I came back to school, so I did have a career before that.
Okay, all right. So you're doing a major in Latin American studies?
Exactly.
A full major in Latin American studies. Okay. Why Latin American studies? What got you interested in this discipline?
One of the things that was just kind of it was a region I was interested in. I didn't know as much about again that aspect of my heritage. I didn't know as much about. I was interested in kind of history, politics. Like my other major is human geography. I'm interested in kind of urban studies, why people live where they live. And then again, one of my minors is in diaspora transnational studies, which a lot of other universities call kind of like migration studies. So the idea of why people move where they move in kind of like large groups. Obviously, it was a story of my family and my history, and I kind of wanted to learn more about it from an academic perspective as opposed to just the family stories that you might hear.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And you did an exchange in Argentina, you said, for 1 year?
Yes, yeah. So I did a full year exchange in Torcuato di Tella University, which is in Buenos Aires. So yeah, I was there for a year.
Okay, and the family on your side's mom is from what part of Argentina? Buenos Aires?
So they're from Buenos Aires as well, like La Provincia. So like San Justo, Lomas del Mirador. It's kind of like Buenos Aires, but not quite El Capital.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's where kind of the majority of my family lives.
Okay.
On that side.
All right. Well, I've been to Argentina once, only one time, back in 2000. When was it? Long time ago. I would say more than 15 years ago. But I really liked it. I enjoyed it a lot. I visited Buenos Aires, made my way to Rosario. Then from Rosario, went to Mendoza. And then from there, I was supposed to go over the Andes, the mountains, cross on a bus, but El Paso, the pass, was closed because of a major snowstorm.
Oh.
So I had to pay the most expensive airfare to just hop on that plane and cross the Andes. I think I paid like $3,000.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just to cross on the other side, because I had my connecting flight to come back to Canada from Santiago. So if I didn't make that flight, I would have had to buy another ticket, separate. So yeah, I had to do it.
And that's even more unfortunate because I have to say I did the bus trip from
Did you?
Mendoza to Santiago, and that was the most beautiful trip I've ever done in my life. It was shockingly
Was
beautiful.
it?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. So I'm gonna have to go back. Argentina. So lately, the president of Argentina has been quite a lot on the news. You, as someone studying Latin American studies, what is your impression of this president of Argentina?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. One thing that's interesting about Milei and kind of Argentinians and how they look at Milei is that it often isn't on kind of the standard lines of right versus left, conservative versus left wing, as despite the fact that he is quite conservative, just because of how things were there for so many years. There were a lot of people that were willing to kind of give him a chance and try something new. So it's been interesting to kind of like talk with family to see kind of political opinions kind of all about throughout the country, and even kind of like regions, to the point where like when I would visit La Provincia, like near my family, or when I was I became a kind of a fan of Racing Club, which is kind of in the province as well. It's a football club. And you would see like kind of graffiti that was anti-Malay. So like the province of Buenos Aires, for example, tends to be very anti-Malay. So yeah, there's quite kind of a disparity in how people think about him. One thing that's really interesting from like a Latin American studies perspective, and kind of I think how we view Latin America in the West, and I thought was really interesting, is how much we kind of erase Latin America from simple things about like political discourse. So for example, one thing I thought was really interesting is it became a big news story when Elon Musk came out with a chainsaw at, I think it was the Republican National Convention.
True.
And everyone was talking about how crazy that was and how it was kind of an odd thing. And I didn't see anything in the mainstream media or like kind of reports that I read about this that mentioned that Milei was in the back because he was the one who gave Musk the chainsaw, and that is his entire deal. Like that is, the chainsaw was very much part of his campaign.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting how like even when it's something that's being talked about, that is kind of influenced by somewhere in Latin America, I thought that was a good example of just us, even when it's in the news, being erased. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Now, you went to Argentina specifically also to make this connection with your family, right? You wanted to know more about them. The Spanish, you already spoke a little bit of Spanish here before you went?
Yes, a little
You
bit.
did, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, Argentinian Spanish, they have different vocabulary, and they even have a different accent compared to other varieties of Spanish. Was it difficult for you, or did you feel totally comfortable with the Spanish that is spoken in Argentina?
The type of Spanish wasn't difficult for me at all. Like, people, of course, mentioned that the accent's different here. And maybe, again, just because it was a Spanish that I was kind of exposed to for some of my childhood. And it wasn't, I found the accent wasn't particularly difficult.
Good.
When I first went there, I went with my mother, and she was, introducing me to like big groups of people. So we'd often go to like a big event or party with 20 or 30 people. That context, of course, a little bit more difficult, but the actual accent I found was pretty comfortable for me.
Okay. Did you go through any cultural shocks when you arrived in Argentina to study?
Cultural shocks? No, that's a good question. Not anything kind of major, I would say. Like, it was just, those like stupid things of, like one thing I think of obviously was, the economy. The economy there is crazy. It's always been crazy. Inflation was, of course, kind of coming under control when I arrived, which would have been kind of like early 2024. But there was something where I was like, oh, you know what? Like, the pricing doesn't make sense. How things are happening doesn't really make sense. But I'm sure that's I'm new, and that will come to make sense as I go on. It did not. Like it did not. There's no like connection between like price and quality. There's no connection between even like how fancy a place is and what the price is. So like that was kind of I don't know if you could call it culture shock, but a little bit of just a shock of not being able to kind of figure out how to do your budget and kind of just your day to day. It was kind of a hard thing to learn how to live.
Okay. And have you visited other Spanish-speaking countries other than Argentina?
Yeah, so I have a fair bit of experience of like visiting Mexico. I think at this point I've been to about 14 states of Mexico, I think.
Okay.
It's a country like my boyfriend's from there, and he moved around a lot as a kid, so he is really familiar with a lot of the country. So when we visited, he's been able to show me a lot of those areas. And then I also have visited Cuba a few times. And then when I was on exchange, I did have a good chance to travel. So I got a chance to go to Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. And I hope I'm not forgetting anything, but it was kind of a crazy trip.
Okay, all right. So you've been to different parts. That's great. Would you say that, what are Argentinians like? If you compare them, for example, with Mexicans, are they that different from Mexicans? What are they like? What is the Argentinian culture like?
Yeah, so one thing I was really kind of surprised at is the warmth of Argentinians. I found that like people were really interested in getting to know you, being your friend, being close to you, family I'd never met, but as well just friends, people on the street. Again, sometimes I would, go to a football game and I would go alone because I didn't have any friends that were interested in that kind of thing. And, fans in the stand by you want to kind of want to get you involved. And so there was definitely kind of a warmth. And one of the surprising things as well is that there's, of course, the stereotype about Argentinians that they're kind of like very arrogant. And I didn't personally find that at all, and I don't know if that was just the moment that they find their country in, but I found it to kind of be the opposite of that case. So I thought that was kind of really interesting, something that and again, maybe I'm biased, but everywhere I visited, I found that like as far as like the people and the warmth and the inclusiveness, I've never met anybody like Argentinians.
Okay. Now, this stereotype about Argentinians being arrogant, where did you hear that, or who told you about that?
I mean, it's kind of like everywhere. I remember there's a I think it's a joke that's in like the two popes when Pope Francis is talking to their pope and says like, how does I don't even remember the joke sometimes, but yeah, no, I think it's a common thing. I think it's I think sometimes there's like other like Latino people don't consider Argentinians part of being Latino, and part of that is Argentinians themselves that kind of say like, we descended from the boats. We didn't descend.
that one I heard in Spanish.
I think it was Malay. Not Malay. It was like a former president of Argentina who said that. So there is the kind of a part of it is they bring it on themselves,
Okay.
but no, it's just not something I personally found at all, which was interesting.
Okay, all right. Well, we should go and visit Argentina then. Very, very, just far away, right? Like, how long does it take you to get there?
It's about 14 hours, 2 flights. I don't think there's any direct flights right now.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think there is a flight that goes from Toronto to Santiago, and then from Santiago they go to Buenos Aires.
I generally always flew through Dominican Republic. I don't know why. That just happened to be the best way. But there was a couple times when we were going, I went to Mexico for one point, so I went through Mexico City as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Now, here in Toronto, the Argentinian community, do you know if it's a sizable community? Are there a lot of Argentinians here?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a ton of Argentinians. One of my kind of childhood memories is often my mother would hear about a new place that has sold empanadas, and they would be the Argentinian style empanadas because of course empanadas are available all in Toronto, but every Latino culture has their own kind of way of doing it. And we would be, driving from our home in Brampton to all these like far reaches of North York or like just other areas of Toronto to get these like specific Argentine empanadas. So that just gives you an idea of the kind of the numbers. I don't think it's something that is significant. I was in a Latin American Studies course this past semester where we actually like my professor was Argentine as well as like myself, and there was one other student, and we were all commenting on how that was very unusual, and that's not something we even experience even in the department here.
Okay, all right. And why did you decide to come to the University of Toronto? Did you think about maybe going somewhere else? What attracted you to this university?
So I actually first, I'm a mature student, but I first came here when I was 18 years old, like straight from high school. And my goal at that point was actually I wanted to go to University of Victoria. I've never been to Victoria. I had no reason to go there besides that I thought it was pretty, and I heard they had bunnies. Like it was not the most adult decision making. I ended up going to applying and getting accepted to University of Toronto. And then when I did like the campus tour, just seeing the older buildings and the history and just knowing like how prestigious it is as a school and organization. I think made the right choice that maybe going for the bunnies to Victoria wasn't the best choice, and that I could get a great education here, and I think overall I've really enjoyed it.
That's great. Okay, would you recommend studying Latin American studies to someone that is thinking maybe of doing that here at the University of Toronto?
Yeah, I think it's a great department. I think it's probably the department I enjoy the most of the three that I'm involved with. It's a really close knit group, and part of that is just the size of the department. It's quite small, so you're going to have a lot of professors like multiple times. You'll be with a lot of the same students. So in that sense, you really kind of build a community, which sometimes can be difficult at the University of Toronto, so specifically. So I think that's something that's really was attractive to me as I was taking more and more courses.
Yeah, that's right. Because I often hear, well, not the case with the classes that I teach. In Spanish, they're fairly small, but oftentimes our students complain that when they go to their business classes, commerce classes, math classes, they're huge. Thousands of students, and they're not able to make community, right? So in Latin American studies, of course, there's more an opportunity to do that. Would you say that most of your classmates in Latin American studies are actually Latinos, or it's a very...
I would say the vast majority
They are actually Latinos.
The vast majority are. And yeah, it was interesting because when I entered the department, I didn't have that at least like self-identification, so I was almost surprised to see Latinos. I don't know why, because I was like, oh, do you know about this? But I think people come at it. What's interesting is especially in a city like Toronto, it's not dominated by one country or one culture, so I think you get a lot of really interesting perspectives from kind of all across the region, and I thought that's something that's been really kind of academically enriching for the department, I think.
Are you involved in student associations here at the university?
So yeah, this year I joined OLAS, which is the Organization of Latin American Students. So I am the liaison for the department.
Okay.
So I work on sometimes like academic events and that sort of thing.
Okay. Do you think it is important for students to be involved in these type of activities?
Yeah, like I think there's so many different activities, and the only thing is it can be overwhelming, which is almost a good problem to have. But yeah, I find the University of Toronto, there's so many different student associations that are kind of related to departments and just related to kind of hobbies and things. But I think it's definitely an important part of the student experience. When I came back full time as a student, that was one thing that I really wanted to do that I didn't have the opportunity to do when I was part time and working a full time job and just kind of coming into the evenings. So I found it's been a great way to find community and to find kind of events and things that add to your experience beyond academics.
Right. Have you thought about the near future? Maybe what are your plans after you graduate? Because you're in your what, last year of
Last semester.
last
So yeah, I feel
semester?
like I'm a few weeks away. I was just looking at the calendar and it feels surreal and impossible,
Wow.
based on how much still needs to get done. But yeah, as far as kind of next steps, it's yeah. When I came back to school, I came back during COVID, and it was kind of just a personal goal. I'd always I like quit school after like my first year. I pretty much only finished the one course that I just did just for fun at that point. And that was, 15 years ago. So when I came back to school, it was actually just kind of a personal goal, which is one of the reasons I did, Latin American studies and human geography, things that didn't necessarily make sense as a career path for me. It was just kind of things that were in my general interest. But I found I really loved being a student. I really loved learning and kind of about these subjects. So now that I'm returned full time and it's kind of made it my focus, it puts a little pressure on because you think, okay, well, what am I going to do with this now?
Right, right.
And the truth is, I'm not 100% sure. I am planning to move to Mexico with
Really?
my boyfriend in November, probably looking at like it will be this year. So I'll be immigrating there, and it adds kind of an added uncertainty that makes things a little bit difficult. But I'm excited about it.
Okay, yeah, that sounds very exciting. Mexico. So I think that because I saw you last week at the Ola. No, there was an event of the department there to showcase the different disciplines that we have.
Exactly.
We talked a little bit about this actually. But are you considering studying in Mexico?
I am, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
part of it is, again, it's a different like educational framework. I don't know what to call it exactly, but
Right.
I mean, grad school in general is kind of a confusing thing to me. I'm a first generation student. My parents didn't go to university. I don't necessarily know how any of that works, even in a
Right.
Canadian context. And then when I bring that to like a Mexican context, it's interesting. Yeah, no, I think I would love to study in the country. I want to kind of improve my Spanish skills to get to the point of being able to do academic Spanish.
Right.
So that's kind of what I want to do. So my plan is to kind of try to find work in the first year. Get those culture shocks and those things that are kind of out of the way that come naturally to immigrating to a new place.
Right.
And then I would love to do kind of a master's in the country.
Nice. So you said you visited how many states in Mexico?
I
20?
think 14. I think I'm at 14.
Well, you
Yeah.
visited more states than I have visited. And I am I'm from Mexico, but I haven't been to that many states there.
You can always cheat if you go near Mexico City because there's so
Right.
many of them there. Like
True.
I
True,
got to
true.
check a lot of the boxes there.
Do you have a favorite state in Mexico or a favorite place?
Ah, that's so difficult, of course. Because then it's a question of like now we have to decide where we're gonna live.
Yeah.
There was places that I loved visiting, but I don't know if it was as livable. So, for example, like one of the most amazing places I think to visit, and I was so excited to go there, was Oaxaca. Obviously, the food, the history, the culture is incredible. But my boyfriend's lived there before, and he was very honest about the reality of living in a place like Oaxaca, and it's not as easy as some places that are maybe a little bit more developed, or just political issues, just kind of a lot of different things to kind of keep in mind. So I loved Mexico City. I'm a big city person. I love cities. It's a beast of a city. I was amazed at how large it was. One thing is, Buenos Aires is a very large city, but it doesn't feel large. It honestly felt like similar to Toronto in a lot of ways. It's just the way they do density is just
Right.
different.
Right.
Whereas Mexico City was something that I spent. All in all, we spent more or less like 6 weeks or 8 weeks there, and I still feel like there's so much I haven't seen, so much I haven't done. And so I think that's a place you could spend your whole life, I think,
Yeah.
and not experience everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, Mexico City is definitely not a place where I would like to live. I could not live there. Being as it is here in Toronto, sometimes I find it overwhelming. I'm more of a small city, small place person. I come from Querétaro, which is fairly small. So yeah, Mexico City, I love visiting, but to live there, I just don't think that I could do well. But nonetheless, very exciting, right?
Yeah,
Very
day in and day
exciting.
out. I feel like it might be a little bit grating. I think after a while, I think it wouldn't take long
Yeah.
for it to be a little bit overwhelming.
You know what I don't like what I don't like at all is like the commute. Maybe if my like if I work very close to where I'm staying, that may be okay. But just the commutes that Mexico City people have to do is just insane.
Oh yes,
You
yeah.
know, they I was watching a documentary the other day, and some people, live like in the north part of the city, which is the state of Mexico. It's outside of the city. And they do like a 2 hour to get downtown and then 2, 3 hour depending on traffic. Come on.
Yeah, no, that's that. We were my boyfriend's family is in Tizayuca, which is
Which is the
Hidalgo, but
north.
like still technically part
Right.
of the greater Mexico. But yeah, it's about an hour and a half bus to like Indias Verdes subway, which is at the very north of the city, and then from there you're going to take about another hour. And there's people who were doing that commute. They're doing that commute. That's their job. That's their yeah. It's crazy.
It is crazy, yeah. Well, I recommend that you check out the Querétaro. I'm biased, of course, but yeah, check it out. Have you been to
No,
Querétaro?
that's one
Never
place I
been,
never
right?
went. Only drove through, but it was
Right.
overnight, so we were on our
Okay.
way to San Miguel
San
de
Miguel.
Allende. Yeah, so
Did you like San Miguel?
I loved it. It
Okay.
was. I did not expect it to be as incredibly beautiful as it was. Like
Yeah.
yeah, it was an absolutely incredible city.
Do
It's so
you see
beautiful.
yourself living in a place like that though in Mexico? In
It's
San
one of those things. Is like I don't know what you would do exactly. Like maybe involved in tourism or but yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of industry or anything besides like expensive shops and things like
Oh
that. So
yeah.
absolutely beautiful city. Like, we were considering Veracruz, and there seemed to be a little bit more options there, but yeah, it was kind of the same thing. I wanted to stay kind of close to a major city, close to kind of where there might be some sort of place where I can develop a career or
Right.
build something.
Right. Okay. So, being a city person, enjoying these big cities, do you like Toronto? Would you say that Toronto is a place you enjoy living in?
I love Toronto. I've always loved Toronto. I've always loved this city. This is like when I was growing up in Brampton, just moving to the city of Toronto was like a big personal goal of mine. I feel like I've not loved it so much in the last few years. I feel like it's there's some things like the way the city's developing that I don't love. I find it's a very hard place to make friends. It's a hard place to kind of build community. And when I talk to immigrant friends of mine, that's something that they definitely notice. And obviously, even living in Latin America for a year, just like the number of friends I made and connections I made compared to what I've made here is shocking. It's
Right.
so I find there's certain things in the culture that I find is a little bit hard to get used to sometimes.
Why do you think it's difficult to make friends here in Toronto?
There is a defensive,ness, I think, of Torontonians, and I have it as well. Is what I've noticed. I was telling a story the other day where I was in Cuba and I went to a resort. It was just a resort vacation. I was there alone. It was just kind of a relaxing vacation, and somebody they were doing a like orientation, and they were mentioning this place you can go. It's like a local like town just to like do shopping, and a girl who was there was like, "Oh, I'm going to be going. I'm alone here too. I'm going to be going into town and like shopping for some things. Do you want to come with me?" And I just said, "Oh no, I'm okay. I'm busy." And I got back to my room and I was like, "Why did I say no? I have no plans. I'm here alone." And my conclusion was that no, that was just the Toronto in me. That the inclination is to say
Yeah.
no. The inclination is to kind of push away anybody who's trying to like become close to you.
Right.
I think a lot of people in Toronto say that like we're polite, we're nice, but we're not necessarily friendly.
Right.
If you try to actually like make connections with people, whether it be work colleagues or not, to do something besides be their work friend, sometimes you'll feel a little pushback. And I think I know that's hard for a lot of like immigrants to the city, but I think it's hard for Torontonians.
Right. Right. Well, now that you caught yourself doing this, has there been another instance where people have offered something similar, like trying to get close to you, and you caught yourself more like aware of this and you decided to actually be part of a certain activity, or
I think so. I'm definitely more conscious of it
yeah,
now. The more conscious of that, that inclination, that desire to kind of just say no automatically, and then try not to do that. So even in like, I feel like since my exchange, I've made friends at U of T, which I don't know if I would have made before then.
right,
Just because made me a little bit more of an open person. It's given
right,
me like more openness to the ability to make connections that are
right.
kind of more than just kind of superficial connections for that day.
Exactly. Now, especially if you're considering moving to Mexico, Mexicans there are going to try to get close to you. They're gonna, invite you to go
Oh
out.
yeah.
It's part of our culture.
Well, it's
So,
very like again, like Tizayuca isn't even like that small of a city, but my husband, he's my boyfriend, sorry, he's a hairdresser. He has a salon there, and like we couldn't do anything. Like we couldn't get tortillas like right at the corner without him running into three other people and having like these like long conversations. And yeah, it's a very kind of social environment. And honestly, like there was parts of that where it was too much for me, where I was like, okay, I do just want to get my tortillas and go home. I think it's one of those things you learn to love.
yeah,
Yeah, I think just how I've grown up in this city in Toronto,
right.
it's going to be a learning process, a learning
Right. Oh,
curve for
yeah, for
sure.
sure, for sure. Now, for those who are watching us and they don't know very well the city, could you tell us where Brampton is?
So Brampton is like a suburb of Toronto. So that
Okay.
would be about, it's about 35 minutes, no traffic, and about like an hour normal days. It's kind of like a bedroom community. So it's quite large city. It's about like 800,000 people, or I think I could be totally wrong there, but it's always kind of rapidly growing.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's mostly just kind of like houses, schools, and smart centers.
Right.
So it's just plazas with WalMarts and that
Right.
sort of thing.
Yeah. 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 So now your father is Italian, full Italian. Was he born in Italy or he was born?
Yeah, so my dad was born in Italy.
Okay. What part of Italy?
So he was born in Calabria.
Calabria.
So there's a
Okay.
place called Siderno Marina, which is like on the kind of east coast of the country.
Okay. Interesting. I've been through Italy back in 2000. When was it? Before the pandemic or after? I think right before the pandemic. I did a trip from the north, from Torino, all the way to Calabria, actually. And then we went through the mountains outside of, where is this place? Don't remember the city, but we crossed the country, like up on the mountains to go to the other side, the Adriatic,
Mm-hmm.
on the Adriatic Sea. And then we went back to the north from the other side.
I did a similar trip
Did
in
you?
2019,
There
right
you
before
go.
the
There
pandemic.
you
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I enjoyed it a lot. And particularly Calabria, lots of mountains there. Uh, and I actually thought of one day maybe moving there to a small town in the middle of nowhere up in the mountains. That is like my setting, Yours is the
Yeah.
city, but mine is like a small town, very, very secluded. That's just my personality.
There was an opportunity a few years ago where they were selling like $1
They are
houses,
still selling
and
them. Yeah.
they needed a lot of work. That's
Yeah,
why they were
of
a
course,
dollar.
of course.
But yeah, people were doing
yeah,
it.
yeah. Now, Latino, as in Latin American culture, is it similar or is it very different from Italian culture?
I find it very similar. I find that and again, that's kind of part of being part of Diaspora as well, is that like you realize even by going and visiting friends' houses or seeing their events and things, like where you feel more at home and they're kind of more similar to your family, and where it feels just a little bit different.
Right.
And I found that like Canadian, like old stock Canadian, like my grandparents are born here. I found those houses were the ones where I didn't necessarily feel uncomfortable, but it felt different. It felt like, oh, this is a different culture than my own. Whereas if I visited, like Latino friends, it would be kind of more similar to kind of the like how Italian families treat each other and interact and talk and the things that are important to them. So, yeah, no, I found it's quite similar.
Right. Okay. Now, the Italian community is very well known here in Canada, very well established. Italians arrived here many decades ago. Would you say that Latinos, as in Latin American people, are on their way to get like that in the future? Do you think that there will be a time when Latin Americans will be very well established here in Canada?
I think it's possible. One of the things is like I don't know numbers like the Italian community. So the Italian community, I have like a love-hate relationship with the Italian community in Canada. And one of the things that I find is a little bit of a struggle with the community is that there is a sort of there was a sort of like whitening of like Italians, Canadians, and Italian Americans, and part of that was just to deal with real racism that they faced. And my father's told me stories about that, about the racism that he faced. He said that when he first came in, his students asked him where he's from. He said Italy, and they beat him up. And he said he knew from that day forward to say he was French, and they didn't bother him. So,
Wow.
but unfortunately, the response to that has often been not like, oh, you shouldn't treat us like this because we're human beings, but oh, like we're actually just as white as you, so therefore we're one of you, so you should treat us as one of you.
Right.
And I don't know if that I find that sometimes is the response of Latinos in America, especially right now in the United States, is that kind of like I've got mine and I'm one of the good ones, and I think that's often been like that was often the Italian response, and I don't want to generalize, but that is I think something that a lot of Italian Canadians struggle with a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've seen that in Latino Canadians, probably for the better, because I don't think it's a good thing.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question.
It does. It brings me to another question, or a comment rather. Just that last week, there was this summit of they call it the Shield of the Americas. Donald Trump is putting together this.
Yes, I saw.
You saw it, right? And there was Marco Rubio there.
Mm-hmm.
Marco Rubio, son of Cuban immigrants. And he made an intervention at this event, and he started speaking Spanish. And he said,
after asking permission.
Exactly. You saw that,
Yeah,
right?
I saw that, yeah.
Right? Well, what do you think of all that? Because it's very problematic, don't you think? And then the other guy, the Secretary of Defense, came to say at that time that he only spoke American.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As in, like, okay, well, he's speaking Spanish, but that is not us.
Mm-hmm.
And you will never be part of us,
Mm-hmm.
even if you hang out with us. Right? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So many thoughts on that. Yeah. So, and I think again, this is sometimes how like diasporas are treated differently in different countries, and something that I study and I've thought about more. And yeah, living in other countries or seeing how it is in other countries, I think you see like some very profound differences. And like to bring it back to, for example, the Italian Canadian community versus the Italian American community, they are very different. Because the Italian Canadian community was able to keep a lot of the things, even, they did experience discrimination, but just, the way that society and kind of dealt with culture and kind of foreign cultures, they were able to keep a lot that Americans weren't. And I think, that desire, though, to be one of the good ones, or to be one of to be the kind of accepted is so huge in the United States. And it's something that I don't want to minimize, 'cause I'm sure people do deal with that here, but I think they deal with it on a level that is like much deeper, and it's definitely kind of something that's really hard for them to navigate. So and I think you see it in kind of stupid little examples like that, where you're like, oh, like right there, like the fact that he even felt the need to ask permission. And then of course there's always the thing that people talk about with Cuban Americans or Venezuelan Americans, which I think often students in the university I have some conflict with here, because I found that sometimes they minimize this struggle that the people from those countries have, but I think that's also definitely like an aspect of it too.
Right. Somewhere here in my bookshelves, I have a book that I don't know if I can find it now, but it's somewhere there. And the title is in Italian, but the rough translation is when the Albanians were the Italians. This to say that Italians throughout history, and just as the example of your father, that he used to say that he was French, so he wouldn't get mistreated, right? The Albanians started arriving in Italy, just like Latin Americans are coming here to Canada, going to other countries, right? And doing jobs that perhaps the general population cannot do for whatever reason, right? But just to that point that you were saying, this process of whitening, right? Very complex, very complex. But not only Italians have gone through that, right? The Germans, for example, also the Irish, right? They, even though like physically you look at them, like they're white, but they were not always considered the same as the English, right? So. In the case of Latin Americans, for example, in the United States, well, it's a very big issue. Who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, let's talk about other things now. Do you think that? Well, I want to hear more about the Italian connection of your family side. What are the stereotypes of Italians? Can you think of any? And then I'm going to ask you, what are the stereotypes of Latinos, Latin Americans that you've heard of? Are they similar to Latinos? What have you heard?
Stereotypes.
Yeah.
I find a lot of them are true for the Italians, like loud, the talking with the hands, like even, recording this podcast, I have to be conscious of the microphone in my hand because otherwise I would be all over the place. I think that's kind of a lot of it, just like the bombastic, like attitude and nature. I think that's something that you'll hear a lot, and you'll see a lot in the cartoonish depiction of Italians in some places.
Okay, so you mentioned loud, being loud. Is that something positive or negative?
I think it depends on who you ask.
Okay.
But
if I ask you, for example.
I prefer loud to quiet. Like I prefer that's the thing, and that's like I was mentioning, kind of visiting the Canadian Anglo-Saxon like families growing up, and we're having dinner.
Right.
And I remember going to like a friend's for just visiting for their like family Christmas dinner and being like, do you all like each other? Like I was kind of confused and it was, I'm sure they did. I'm sure they loved each other, but it was just a very different sort of interaction. It was just whereas my family Christmas would be 6 different conversations happening at once, yelling over each other, like big arguments, but then they stop as soon as they're done and you move on, and there's no like lingering thing, which again could be a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes those things should be lingered and it should be talked about, but often you can kind of just move on to the next thing. I think that's kind of what I would think of when I think of like the Italian stereotypes of loudness. Okay.
And when it comes to Latinos, what have you heard?
I feel like it's some of the similar old things, like you have like the crazy Latina ex-girlfriend, like you have that like you have that kind of bombastic I think stereotype that sometimes is similar. And then I think also there's the stereotype of just being like very easygoing about everything, which I think there's something. I think there's some truth to that as well. I think in general, like again, it's a big, all-encompassing term, Latino, but I think often people do have kind of a very easygoing personality about things.
Right.
So I think that's sometimes what you hear.
Okay. Now, for those who are watching this podcast and are thinking of coming to visit or even live here in Canada, can you think of any stereotypes of Canadians? Like, what can you tell?
I like one of the things kind of we mentioned about Canadians being nice, and especially I think as a Latino visiting, I think or coming or considering living there, like you might confuse that niceness with friendliness, and like I said, you'll have to push past that a few times. I think there is kind of a general stereotype of things being like easy here, or that, again, my boyfriend will get lots of, like, we travel, we'll post on Instagram and post, like, nice things, but of course that's, your Instagram life. Like, he's working very hard every other day, but he'll often have people being like, oh, how are you doing all this? How are you traveling? Like, what do you do? You're not working at all? And like, oh, can I move to Canada? And I'll be like, I'm not even moved here. Like, I'm not. So I think there's kind of sometimes like there's a stereotype about how about like there's so much possibility here that there isn't necessarily.
Right. It is difficult, right, to make a living here. It's very expensive, especially in the big cities in everywhere in the country now. It's expensive, but it is expensive also in Mexico. When was the last time you were there?
I have no concept of time anymore, so I think it was earlier this year.
Okay,
it was earlier this year. Yeah.
Well, it's certainly I compare it to few years ago, and it was not as expensive as it is now, especially Mexico City. You go to a restaurant in Mexico City now, it's so expensive. Well, in the gentrified areas like Condesa and all these places everybody wants to go. So to think that Mexico is that cheap, not that anymore. I mean, even the Canadian dollar is certainly not very high right now, so your dollar does not go very far now. All right, Diego. So Italians and Latinos very similar, right? From your perception.
Yeah, I think they're very similar in culture. And then again, it was especially interesting to see like my Italian Argentino family,
right?
Because it explains a lot. It explains a lot about my mother. It explains a lot about like the culture there, which is influenced by both.
Right. Now you mentioned your partner, your boyfriend, right? He's from Mexico. You said. Is it difficult, do you think, for the LGBT people here in Canada to be? Is it different being an LGBT in Toronto than being LGBT in smaller town in Canada? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like it's one of the things I definitely kind of take for granted, I think. I was traveling in like Sault Ste. Marie several years ago with a boyfriend at the time, and we were just holding hands, like nothing but just and we got like a comment from some passerby, and it was almost like funny to me at the time, because I was like, oh, I forgot that it's like you might have to be a little bit more careful in some places. And I've got one comment in Mexico City as well from somebody, and it's not something that like it's
in Mexico City.
In Mexico City, yeah.
Really? Okay.
I think it was in, I don't remember exactly the area, but it was like downtown Mexico City, and it was just somebody saying like, oh, this is what makes me sad, I guess this. Yeah, so I think it's something you have to be a little bit more cautious of or careful about. But yeah.
Okay, all right. Now, did you ever feel, because we hear, especially lately, about Mexico, what just happened a few weeks ago with the killing of this very important person involved in drugs. Have you ever felt unsafe in Mexico? Did you ever feel, that maybe your life would be in danger if you went there?
No, like I'm lucky enough. I've never had any sort of like negative experience, or even the feeling of something negative there. We took a lot of buses, and we took a lot of buses like to the city, to Mexico City, and like my boyfriend would always kind of like prepare me for that as well. I'll be like, okay, put this money in your pocket. This is the money to give if somebody comes on the bus, and sometimes like we end up doing this, but I know some people would have like an extra phone just in case, because they expect you to have a phone. So there's certain little precautions that you take. But I took similar precautions in Argentina. I had like a cousin who told me like, okay, you want to put this bill on the outside, and then you put all the small bills in the middle, and this is the thing, you can keep this in your pocket. So yeah, if somebody bugs you on the street, you can give them money, they'll go away, and it won't be. So it's these little like precautions that you have to make. But
nothing
ever happened, and I never had like a negative feeling where it felt like, oh, I shouldn't be here or something like that.
Right. Has any of that happened to you here in the city of Toronto in terms of safety? Have you ever had any issues with that?
I can't say I have. I can't say I have. And then again, that's something that like I think I'll have to be a little bit more cautious of when I move to Mexico City or sorry move to Mexico, just because that's the thing I think we take for granted here. And I'm sure it's a different experience for different people, different neighborhoods. If you're a woman, I'm sure it's different. But I live in Parkdale. I live in what is known as a rough neighborhood by Toronto standards. And that caveat means that in general I've never actually felt unsafe or kind of like I can't go out at night or I can't if I want to walk to the corner store in the middle of the night, I've never felt like, oh, that's not a thing I should do. And that's something I think that I take for granted here.
Have you been to a rough neighborhood in Mexico?
Yeah, like I think I've been through I think I've been to areas and being with somebody who like knows things a little bit more, I think there's areas where we've almost walked towards something, and he said like, no, I don't like the feeling of this. We're gonna turn back.
Okay.
So part of that is having that like institutional knowledge of sorts. Also, I've just been to like smaller residential neighborhoods that aren't really the touristy areas, and as a result, like especially at night, you want to be a little bit more cautious. And that was the same thing even in Buenos Aires. Like my family was pretty cautious about me moving there. And they were very cautious, but I found that they were a lot more cautious in the La Provincia de Buenos Aires than like Buenos Aires la capital, whereas things like the muggings and the things that are happening aren't as common. So I think there was definitely areas where you could tell that this is kind of a little bit rougher.
Right. Now in my culture, Mexican culture, and in general in Latin American culture, people are very used to like staring at people. People stare a lot. Did you encounter that in Argentina or in Mexico? How did that make you feel?
That's interesting. I can't say I felt that.
No?
I can't say
You didn't feel like
no.
this? People were like looking at you, like staring at you constantly?
No, I'm going to be conscious of that.
Yeah, now you are. Sorry. Because that is...
But again,
yeah?
I think this might be the Toronto like bit, is that like we're very much like look forward, kind of
Yes,
get where you're going to
exactly.
go. And I find that like sometimes I'm not necessarily as conscious of what's happening around me,
Okay.
unless I feel like I need to be.
You see, that's something that I'm always very conscious about, like here and in Mexico. So when I'm here, it's like I already know that I'm not supposed to like stare at anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like my business. And when I'm in Mexico, I feel people staring, like constantly. And that makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know if you've ever felt like that there. But
No, I can't say I have.
on your next trip,
Yeah, I was like,
pay more attention
keep
to
an eye
that
out,
and then
yeah.
let me know how you feel. We have a visit of students from Mexico, Universidad Autónoma de Querétaro. They're coming next week. By the time this episode is up and running, they would have already come here and enjoyed everything. But one of the things that I tell them before they arrive here in Canada is precisely that, to be mindful of their staring, because in Mexico, we're so used to checking people out, seeing what's going on. But here, especially when I came to Canada back in 17 years ago, I caught myself doing that, and then people would like give me a really nasty look, and that's when I learned, okay, this is not something you do in this culture. So I always emphasize this to the group of students that come to visit us from Mexico, because I don't want them to, get a nasty look from people, want them to be aware that that is just not that acceptable.
It's funny, those little cultural rules that you don't know about, and you don't know you're going to offend somebody or
Yeah. So, all right. Do you have any favorite Latino food besides empanadas?
Empanadas are good, but
What's your favorite Mexican dish, for example?
a Mexican dish. Favorite Mexican dish? I love like enmoladas, like the
Enmoladas.
mole and the
Okay.
enchiladas. Like that's probably a good one. I actually made it for my I brought some from Oaxaca. I got and made it for my Argentine family there, who surprisingly liked it, even though it was a little bit spicy. They don't do spice at all.
Wow.
But that's probably my favorite go-to. And then it's harder to find in Toronto. I've heard there's a couple places, but I've been looking for a torta ahogada. That's
Yeah.
probably one that I really like as well.
There is one very good place down in North York, and there's actually an Italian sandwich place across from it. What's it called? It's on. Oh my God. It's no longer called Eglinton West, that station. Now they call it Cedar Vale, right? Well, on that Eglinton and Dufferin, I think.
Yeah, I was say that maybe Dufferin. I was like, that's a good area for a Latino restaurant.
Right.
I feel like Toronto's, in the last few years, the Mexican food has gotten much better. Much better.
That's true.
It was always just, I mean, you have, of course, not just tacos and tequila, but that's all it was for a while. It was just tacos and tequila.
Yeah.
I forgot what it's called, chiles en nogada recently when I went there. That was incredible. Yeah, that was that was something I really enjoyed the last time I went to Mexico. So and that's something I've never seen in Canada and would probably cost $1 million if they tried to make it.
Totally. Now, so you have no problem with spicy food. You're okay with spice.
I'm getting a little bit better at it.
Yeah.
I just made a cortito. I forgot what it's called. I just made like with the cabbage and the red peppers and the red onions and the habanero peppers. I just made yesterday. It's marinating in my fridge right now, so we'll see if I can handle that. But it's something that I definitely can't handle it on a Mexican level, but I do like the taste.
Well, you're gonna have to when you go to Mexico. If you go live there.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to, but it'd be nice.
You kind of do though. You kind of do. Like everything is like all the sauces, even the least spicy one is pretty spicy.
Yeah.
So
Now, with Italian food, for example, do you have any favorite Italian dishes?
I mean, go with a simple classic, but like lasagna is my mother's lasagna is the best in the world. I know everyone says that, but this one is true. But that's probably go to. And then there's like again, kind of like it's actually an Italian Americanism, which I just learned recently is my favorite to make is pasta alla vodka. But yeah, just kind of all the pastas.
Yeah, of course. Now, do you speak Italian?
No, so my parents, that's the thing, is my mom spoke 3 languages. My dad speaks Italian and English and Calabrese, so it's a separate language. They spoke it at home, but mostly just to kind of like hide things from us, the things that they wanted to say privately. And it was spoken at like at events. But no, I never spoke it. I learned a little bit as a kid. I know some words. My parents taught us all cleaning words in Italian. I don't know why. Like I didn't know what a washcloth was till I was 14, or like a dustpan. Like even now I have to think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a very, very weirdly inconsistent Italian pedagogy that was going on in my childhood.
Okay. Now, when it comes to Spanish, what is the most difficult thing for you to learn, to understand in Spanish? Grammar.
Like in grammar, okay.
Yeah.
I think definitely just the masculine, feminine. I think
that's difficult
the thing
for you.
that, especially when I'm putting other like adjectives and things on it, or when there's words that sound like they're one or the other and they're not. Like el taxista, it's like something like that where you're like, okay, it has that a. So just kind of putting it all together, I find is kind of a difficult part. In general, languages are just not something that comes naturally to me.
Okay.
I find that like I really have to work at it, and the fact that I'm uncomfortable. I don't like being uncomfortable, and as a result, it's hard for me to, if I'm in a room with somebody who speaks Spanish and English, I'm going to speak to them in English. So that's one of the reasons I did the exchange. Is I'm like, I need to be forced. I need to be forced to do this. Otherwise, I'm not going to learn.
And did you see any improvement in your language skills?
Oh yeah, like night and day. Like it was so it's like so much better like now than when I started. And even I spent like 6 weeks with my suegra, my partner's mother, who like doesn't speak any English. So just being in kind of a community where again it's not like a tourist community. People don't really speak English. So so it's something that you're forced to do. I find that's something where like I kind of need that to be able to actually keep learning.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Now, is Spanish here in Toronto a common language you hear out in the streets?
Yeah, I find that you hear it a lot, and to the point where like I think there are people that don't really focus on learning English that much. Like we have friends that like they kind of just stay within their own community. They're where they work every day. They're speaking Spanish. I think it's a language that you'll hear kind of every day on the street, just walking the streets of Toronto.
Right. Great. Well, muchas gracias, Diego. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode, More Than Tequila. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. We wish you the best if you end up in Mexico or wherever you may go. Buena suerte.
Gracias.
Gracias a todos. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the next episode of More Than Tequila. Hasta luego.